Cool. We are live and recording is running. Good day and welcome everybody to this week's webinar. It's been a minute. I was traveling for 6 hours. We had some conferences, so we actually skipped one session that was supposed to happen last week. But we're back in the swing of things. Going to try and do these again every second week. Today we've got Justin with us, Justin Rowe. Do I say that correctly?
Rowe,
sorry, my bad.
Okay.
There we go. So we've got Justin with us. I'm sure most of you know who Justin is. Very prominent figure in the industry on LinkedIn. Great content. That's why we have him here. So basically, we're going to talk about LinkedIn ads, but not only LinkedIn ads, B2B ad campaigns and how we make these work. Misconceptions that's running around, things people think they need to do that they shouldn't do. We're going to touch a little bit on AI. I'm quite curious to hear Justin's thoughts on how it's influencing things, how it's accelerating things, where there's pitfalls, and also just kind of what's really working out there at the moment from Justin's perspective of working with big brands, big budgets, and actually making things work. But first, Justin, for those who don't know you, do you mind giving a quick introduction to who you are and what you do?
Of course. So my name is Justin Rowe. I am the founder and CEO of Impactable, which is a B2B LinkedIn ads agency. My little lead generation agency was acquired about 3 years ago, and we pivoted into the ad space. And I consider myself more of a broad spectrum marketer. So yes, our agency is focused on one channel, but I feel like that can only work in a healthy ecosystem. So I spend a lot of my time and effort looking at it as a whole. Yeah.
Cool. There we go. Short and sweet. So to kick this off, I think let's quick fire misconceptions. I'll start with one. Obviously, people think you need big budgets for LinkedIn. I think this is the most common one that I at least run into. Where I've spent most of my time is the more the kind of mid-market, and oftentimes when LinkedIn ads come up, it's like, no, we don't have money for that. I'm like, you don't necessarily need like 100K to get started. It's different places. So from your side, what is like right now the current setup, the things that's really readily available in March 2025? What are the biggest misconceptions that's out there when people start thinking about running B2B ads and on LinkedIn specifically?
I would say, that you have to start with a big budget, that you're wasting your time if you don't have like at least $10,000 a month to throw at it. That kind of go into the second one of LinkedIn ads is too expensive. But in that context, they're talking about the cost per, click and lead and revenue. They think that it's just a more expensive acquisition channel. That's probably one of the biggest ones. And then they don't say it explicitly, but one of the biggest misconceptions that I think is just implied is that LinkedIn is another channel to kind of carve out from scratch in a silo and get up and running. And I think those are some of the three biggest misconceptions. And I don't think people have any idea like what good strategy or healthy like LinkedIn ads or how that fits into everything else they're doing. And again, to the third one, I guess they just look at it as a new exploratory channel that's expensive and hard to understand is kind of what a lot of people, even mature people, kind of think about it.
And that is why it is expensive sometimes, right? That's if you take it in isolation, you start building it exactly the same as you would do your Facebook ads, for instance. It becomes expensive because you're not seeing the results immediately. It's definitely one of the more expensive platforms. But funny enough, I've also seen results that are, if you go about like how specific, obviously you can target, it actually becomes more cost effective per click than just spray and pray on Facebook nowadays, for instance. So just a quick one. Do you feel that a lot of people misinterpret a lot of the ad formats? Because I know there's obviously, we've got the lead gen ads, we've got the message ads, we've got the thought leadership ads nowadays, we've got the standard, the feed ads, which can obviously be your image or your video or your text, and then you've got the side panel ads, you've got the like the display ads. There's actually a lot to it that I think a lot of people just don't ever even think about or use, or like they just default to let's post a video and basically boost it to an audience of whoever we want to target.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. Like I think as a marketer, I have a lot of respect for almost every channel. I know enough to be dangerous about each channel, and I've realized that each channel is its own ocean of knowledge that deserves kind of, its area of expertise. And yeah, LinkedIn has a huge variety of different ad formats and types. I think that leads to the confusion because yeah, even mature advertisers, they'll just take their image or video assets, they'll boost it. They'll throw one asset in a campaign, throw tons of money behind it, and then, look at that. So I do think, yeah, there's a huge gap of understanding between what the different assets are, how to use those, how those fit into like everything else you're doing, and then how they compare success. Like you can't judge text ads by the same standards of click-through rate that you would a single image ad in the feed. And so there's a big misunderstanding around what you use and how you judge success and how those fit into a cohesive strategy, which probably leads to the other misconceptions of expensiveness and whatnot.
Cool. I'll follow up quickly on that with not to put you on the spot, but what would you, if we look at that spectrum, almost like for the sake of, because we'll visit like the ecosystem, which obviously expands outside of LinkedIn a bit later. But what would you kind of, quick fire examples of what you would use the different ad formats for? When is it a good time to just have that, standard image, which is probably the good place to start, but when is it a good idea to have your lead gen? When is it good to go into someone's inbox? When is it a good idea to have your ad running on the side panel, which is, I know you do with Impactable quite religiously. Yeah. It's always there. Like you see it come by like every so often. It's like, hey, Impactable is still there on the side of my LinkedIn. Which obviously fits your brand because you're selling LinkedIn advertising services, but what fits where? Like, what should people at the top of their mind kind of have, within like arm's reach when they're running these things?
Yeah, maybe a basic, simplistic way to think about some of these things would be, cold initial ads. What's a great, powerful, intentful first touch? Usually single image in the feed, video in the feed, make great first touches. Now, once they visit your website, your company page, interact with those cold ads, now they become slightly warmer or at least curious prospects. Other formats kind of open up. I usually stay in front of that group with text ads, spotlight ads, follower ads, which, you're saying, yeah, my idea is if you're a warm prospect in my ecosystem, I want to show my logo on, anytime you come on. And then I would say when you have single image and video ads or thought leader ads in the retargeting, it opens up additional layers where you can say, okay, if they view 75% of a video in my retargeting layer, I want to then have a high intent lead gen form triggered to that group, or conversation ads, the direct DMs. So I kind of layer them in initial good first touches, nurturing and building trust. And there's a huge variety that I would use there. And then I would take those signals and then kind of cultivate those into the highest CTA, strong action lead gen type stuff, or conversation ads as a higher intent in a smaller segment that plays off of that. So that's kind of how I think of, and I guess the other simplistic way would be you have initial awareness and getting in front of people, you have building trust, and there's different formats. And then the long term, that's really expensive. Long term, from 90 to 180 days, I usually drop off the expensive in feed. I stay in front of them longer with the lighter touches on the side. And so I also think of it in those terms.
Cool. Just kind of thinking of something else here. LinkedIn, like from my perspective at least, I think they've been quite good at the last while with updating and adding features, which is not something you often see on like most of the ad platforms. I mean, Google does their fair amount of like, new things, but LinkedIn has been really on it with their product releases. It's almost like there's new ways to track, new ways to get in front of the audience that they're testing the whole time. What's your perception of this? Anything that stands out as like, I'm super happy they added this in like the last 6 months or like the last year, like I'm really looking forward to a new feature, or like anything?
Yeah, and from the perspective of someone who started off with LinkedIn lead gen, who was skirting the terms of service of LinkedIn, I got a cease and desist letter, I got my company page taken, to now I really actually love what LinkedIn's doing. I'm partnering with them on a more consistent basis. But yeah, some of the biggest things they've done is they've introduced new metrics that give us more information. So dwell time, audience penetration is a new one. They've started implementing this company hub, so you can actually see companies that are most engaged with your ads. They're giving us more insights, and they're working on attribution. They've opened up the conversion, CAPI conversion API. So now taking offline conversions more consistently, like they've taken really legitimate good steps towards like what, the direction I would have gone if I could have a voice at the table. And of course, they've also like opened up an independent agency partnership that they included us in. So, but I really feel like they've taken really great steps in the last like 6 months. Some of the stuff they have coming up, and they have taken feedback. One of the biggest things I thought was one of the biggest flaws was the LinkedIn Audience Network that I just thought was garbage for so long. They've really, it's still not, great in every circumstance, but there's actually more and more use cases and they give you more control. You can exclude categories. So yeah, they're definitely rolling out pretty decent upgrades and features, especially in the last year.
Yeah, I personally, I like the fact that you could target specific events on your landing page with retargeting to someone that clicks. So I'm super impressed. Like there used to, like, I feel like 2 years ago when you had to run LinkedIn, I was like, I don't want to go to the back end. Yeah. It's like tedious. And now I almost feel like every time I get there, it's like, oh, there's a new button that I didn't know. There's like a new sparkly little feature that's there. So super cool. I had something I wanted to ask now. I'm sure we'll come back. Anyway, let's go over to the big question. What, and I know this is broad, there's no one size fits all to what works out there, but there's obviously things that we do know work better than other things. And I think right at the top of the list of kind of movements in the market, and this is also where my idea around, like, I want to hear your thoughts on AI. It's not specific, like what tools are you using and what to do with ChatGPT. There's in recent, I almost want to say like 12 months, more like 6 months, LinkedIn itself has become way more like cluttered with content. I have my reservations about whether it's good content or bad content, or just I obviously encourage everyone to make content, and it's great that more people have now like kind of the accessibility to put like rather decent content out there. But obviously with this obviously comes more noise, more people are kind of reserving. There's a bigger push towards kind of people buying from people, especially in the B2B space. We know that thought leadership ads are performing well. I can see it on my side. I think everyone that runs LinkedIn ads and have one of those going, they outperformed anything from the product page like 10-1. So we know the thought leadership ads are working, but obviously you can't just default to doing only that. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, and let's make this practical. Let's try to like split this into 3 groups, like your SaaS companies, your agencies and service businesses, and then what else is like prominent on LinkedIn. What's the setup that's really working, that if a new customer comes through and you order it, you're like, you have to do this. This is probably a great place to start. What is that advice? If you can give it like in a condensed version, obviously we can talk about this for hours, but some form of indication of what's working out there right now.
So thought leader ads are definitely killing it. And yeah, it's kind of the rise of the demand gen principles and also subject matter experts. That's always been a thing, but I guess it's never been as easy to push subject matter experts from your company out front or have founder-led marketing, which I guess is just, subject matter expert leading from the very front, but bigger organizations can push more. So that works really well. The reason that works for B2B is because, in my mind, the biggest thing about that people get wrong that LinkedIn helps with is the e-com does this really well. If you visit the website, they retarget you for 90 days. But in the B2B world, it's not just about timing and like brand presence. Like there's this huge gap of trust that has to be overcome before someone feels confident making a big B2B purchase. And so thought leadership ads and trust building type content is big. So not just thought leader ads, but events, third-party validation, even these kind of interviews like could work really well on both sides for our audiences to, to have that cross-pollination and to have trust. So building trust and trust building assets and using that methodology in retargeting, I think works really well. And then from there, looking for signals, I've actually seen lead gen forms kind of triggered from percentage of videos, percentage of video viewed working really well. I've actually seen conversation ads working really well. So if you put a thought leadership ad where you're, have a series of videos and then you send a personalized DM through conversation ads to people highly engaged with those videos, that's a really good combination.
It's like, I saw you watch my video. I'm just reaching out and say hi.
And the other big thing that, I've been pushing for, and kind of one of the things that we built Impactable on, was this idea that LinkedIn has this superpower of seeing all your website traffic through its insight tag, but being able to layer on all those qualifying filters on top of that. So realizing that you're not starting from scratch. If you're running paid search and you're getting good conversions there, you can retarget, qualify that traffic, and build trust through thought leader ads, event, like that kind of stuff. You can actually convert more of the other stuff you're doing and get to a quicker ROI with LinkedIn. And that combination, the more companies that latch on to, paid search or however they're primarily getting acquisition now, and then amplifying, qualifying, converting with LinkedIn ads, that's working really well. But yeah, it's not necessarily ad assets or types and maybe like the framework strategy. It's that thought process of, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to move the needle on trust with a qualified buyer group, so that if and when they have a need, we're at the top of the list. And that kind of methodology is working. And then, LinkedIn's rolling out more ad types that help facilitate that really well, like thought leader ads, for example.
Yeah, so I guess we come back to that 95-5 rule, or 97 or whatever it is nowadays. Mental availability, and then obviously the trust. So making sure that you're in front of the right audience. It works better if they were already on your website and there's an indication of they're looking for whatever it is that you're selling, and then using LinkedIn as your leverage to basically build that trust there. And I always want to go as far as say, the more raw the content nowadays, the better. It's like, it's super easy to cut videos and everything becomes AI-ized and like cool. It's like, for me at least, or this is what I like consuming, is I like seeing a video that is not snipped to bits and pieces by like some AI tool that removed every like and sigh and breath. It just becomes like a little bit like, okay, cool, I see you're using the tools and nice, but it takes away the authenticity, and that authenticity layer becomes super important to obviously build that trust. Because if someone is willing to watch a longer kind of unedited video, there's clear signs and signals that they've got that intent. I actually like the idea that you said, like, if someone watched like 3 or 4 videos to like a point where like 75% or something, you didn't like, hey, we're here, maybe you want to talk about like buying our services. It's the in-message ads are something I personally actually don't use that much. I guess it's also business specific, obviously. So just to split that kind of up. So would you say this works well for both your kind of SaaS like groups or like agencies, or your in kind of message targeting? I personally assume at this point works like better for your kind of situation, where it's an agency and you know that person is kind of like absorbing your content because they want that, or is there no real difference between the two groups?
I guess for marketing agencies and business services in general, like, yes, those are different categories, but they have similar, where it's, kind of people are buying from the people experts that exist in there, is a little different than SaaS. And so I would say, in business services and marketing agencies, putting your top people and running the thought leaders and then amplifying what's working organically with ads is a great play. On the SaaS side, it is, I would say a little different because in some of those, but I've seen it work, very well in some cases. I'm looking at like our B2B, but that, he posted how much time he actually spends on LinkedIn. Like few functional founders would have, like that's a full-time job. And so, if you have the luxury of not actually having to build your own business and you could just be the social media icon, like, okay, that could work. But for the SaaS, I do think there's still value in putting your experts. You still want people who understand the problem they're solving and understand, yes, you're solving it with a tool or a platform, but it does really help still to elevate that you have experts and people who deeply and intimately understand the problem and the solutions, and you're confident that they're going to continue to stay, ahead of the trend and continue to help you solve those problems. So I do think it can work very similarly. Obviously, there's going to be nuances in maybe the targeting and the buying committee and the retargeting side of that, but for the most part, we haven't seen that it needs some dramatically different ad types and process. It's still trust. And even on the SaaS side, If it's an enterprise solution, 5, 10, whatever, $15,000, like it still takes a decent amount of trust. Now on I guess the other side where it wouldn't work that well is if it's a very low cost SaaS tool. Maybe LinkedIn can be maybe
expensive.
There's an LTV threshold where LinkedIn doesn't make sense, and that's why it doesn't amazingly make sense for e-com or maybe the smaller side of SaaS. But for the enterprise SaaS or the mid-level market SaaS, attribution software, stuff like that, then it works very similarly to the other ones.
Cool. Let's put that threshold into numbers for the people watching. Where do you draw that line of like it is worth the LTV or it's not? What's the low end or the low cost spectrum where it falls off?
Yeah, if your LTV is above 10K, you should be able to carve out a decent ROI. If it's below 5K, it starts to get dicey. I've seen decent situations where someone with a 3 to 5K LTV still does decent, but 5 to 10 gets a lot better. 10 plus, that should almost be a no-brainer. You're probably gonna see decent results on LinkedIn, but for e-com and for like the SaaS tools that have maybe less than 5K LTV, it's kind of tough.
Cool. That makes it concrete. I quickly want to cycle back a little bit. You mentioned Adam from B2B. Was lucky enough to have him on a few months ago, exactly on this topic, and he was like, he spends like back then it was like 20% of his time just going at this, and this is his playbook. The founder just needs to like build that expertise, connect with the people, build in public, which founder-led marketing, we obviously know that there's a lot of people speaking about this right now. It is the way to go, kind of grounded in this conversation around the trust. Like, I want to buy from the person. I want to know that you understand my problems and that you know how to solve them, and then you selling something that solves that problem. The thing is, it's not really just founder-led marketing. The founder-led part is just obviously get your founder in front of the camera, but the bigger the companies, you don't necessarily need the founder. It could be the CEO, it could be any thought leader at the company. Obviously, you use the term subject matter expert, which is the correct term there. The thing is, not enough people actually sing that song. It's just like, hey, founded it. And I think it actually creates like a flawed perception in the market where if a lot of marketers here are founder-led marketing, you have to get your founder in front of the camera. That's actually not the case. It's person-led marketing, trust building strategies where you get a person that knows a lot about the subject, happens to work at your company, maybe even not. It could also just be an influencer or an ambassador that promotes your product. But the thing that you want to do is obviously get that person to deliver that thought leadership or that bring that kind of point of view to the table. Any thoughts on that? Do you agree with me?
That's a good point and a nuance that it doesn't even necessarily have to be someone from your company. I'm thinking of like influencer marketing and in the B2B world, like if it's a trusted person and and I think that's the big connection is like, I'm watching you, I respect this person, I know that they intimately know my problem and they're recommending this solution. And so, it doesn't even necessarily have to be their solution. If they're telling me this tool solves the problem that I have and I'm convinced they understand the problem I have, I'm gonna, you can. So I think that's an important nuance because that means like, of course it doesn't have to be the founder and it could be someone from the company or it could be a trusted person that has an audience and can deliver that message. But I think founder-led, I think is taking off because most of the companies that on LinkedIn that are most vocal are the smaller ones, and that's what they have in their arsenal. The bigger companies can push out subject matter experts. And I've seen this playbook from the CMO, head of marketing, head of demand gen, or I think it could work really well from like the CTO or, other positions where if they're out front and maybe from the tech companies or the SaaS, maybe the CTO is, or, someone on the technical side is a better person to be talking about, or an influence around that might be better than their founder who maybe is less technical and isn't going to be as respected by the technical people buying the solution. So I think thinking about it in those terms is really helpful, and then it opens up additional options.
Yeah, because I mean, there's always the problem is if it's not the founder, you sit with the situation where you build the face of the company becomes someone that can ultimately leave.
Yeah,
which is always a problem. So, like opening that up to let's call them ambassadors or B2B influencers, is then obviously a foolproof way to keep that going. But then you don't have that one person who's associated with the brand. On that thought, just kind of like came up now, I'm seeing a very big uptake in B2B influencers now publicly wearing the badge of brand ambassador. I don't know. It's almost like I took note of this a week ago. Maybe I was just like oblivious to it or like didn't see it. But everywhere I kind of now go into like someone with a high followings profile, there's like brand ambassador at company, and sometimes it's like listed quite a few. Is this something you're picking up as well? Is this like a new wave coming in? I know it's been happening, but it feels like it's been happening in the shadows a bit more. Now it's like, I'm ambassador of this company. Like putting it on it's like a job that I'm putting on my LinkedIn.
So I noticed this too, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And then, it's getting more widespread. So in my, I'm making some assumptions, but some educated guesses based on what I'm seeing too. When influencer ads came out, I saw a big burst of people wanting to leverage that for B2B influencers outside of their company. And at the time, in order to do that, they had to be associated with the company. So that was a workaround where they say, I'm a brand ambassador for this company. I'm now tied to the company page. Now they can sponsor my personal content and, I'm getting paid for it. So, but more recently, I don't know how many months ago this happened. You don't actually have to be connected to someone's company at all in order to get your post sponsored. So, and then separately, or I guess at the same time, I have seen a massive uptick in B2B brands seeking out B2B influencers. I've been approached a dozen times, and I know people in my circle, I see them making these posts for these different, and I know what's going on. So I've seen that kind of explode even in the last 6 months. Tons of brands are really leaning into that. So I think it's a combination of those, the thought leader ads, the B2B influencer movement, and then more B2B brands leaning into that.
Cool. Are you seeing any success for that for any of the brands you manage?
We haven't. It's been one of the things that's on my mind. Because we facilitate thought leader ads. I believe in the influencer marketing. We don't offer any kind of solution around that. We have clients who are leaning into that or pursuing it more on their own. And I do see success with that. And I guess it's one thing I've been preaching for a while is like third-party validation is massive. And also the way LinkedIn presents thought leader ads is still really sneaky. Like, I don't think 90% of the time people realize that it's even an ad they're seeing. It looks so organic and the promoted is so tiny. So I actually, I think those companies that are doing it from what I've seen are seeing success. It's working, and then they double down on it. And it's probably something that will take off and get a lot bigger stronghold this year. And I'm toying with, how can we leverage that for ourselves? Who should be our strategic partners and who can we dabble with? And I think we're going to play with that more this year.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's definitely going to, if you're taking note of it more, you're just sitting more with companies who's dating that. It's definitely on the rise. Do you think that as all things that obviously have as a lifespan, like it might dilute the trust factor? Because like if I now go on LinkedIn and I just see everyone posting about the same thing, cool, but it also kind of steals away from the authenticity then, because like I can spot a paid post from a mile away, like especially if you follow someone for a while and you kind of know what they're posting, and then all of a sudden there's like this like dead obvious sales pitch for like a different company or a tool, like, hey, I use this for XYZ and this has changed my life. It's like obviously you're being paid like $1,000 up for that post, which immediately for me at least, and I'm skeptical because this is just the line of work, and some people might not think about it this way, but it immediately takes away from both my respect for that person, because I'm like, okay, you just sold out to a tool, and number two, if that's their like method, is just paying people to talk about them, then it kind of takes away from what I think about them. Do you think that's a lifespan?
Yeah, I think people will have the same opinion about paid listing sites and review sites. And I believe maybe your opinion is very similar on those where, okay, I find you on, Clutch or G2 or whatever these things are, and I know how it works, so I'm very skeptical. I would argue that the average buyer is not as informed or skeptical as you and I are when aren't looking at ads in the same lens. And I also, one of the things I've really latched onto from the beginning on LinkedIn is that your feed is not the same as your prospects feed or the people you're selling to. So when I log in, mine is inundated with other content creators. I'm constantly engaging with them. It's probably 90% other influencers. And so that influences how I think I need to show up on the feed. But then I take a step back and I realize my average prospect has 500 connections on LinkedIn. They're not connected to the same people as me. They're not seeing the same feed. And so what I post and what they see from me, it's through a different lens. So I do think, and kind of the evidence, that I've seen so far is that it works and it's not eroding the trust for those. Now, if you're a marketer selling to marketers, I think then you're in a tricky spot because that is a very much more astute and probably critical group. But for most orgs, I think, those plays still work really well. And the B2B buyer isn't as informed or skeptical on those things. They do want trust, but they actually find satisfaction in those third-party validations. And then I guess the last part would be like, it does need to make sense. It does need to be like, because I can spot it a mile away too, but then I actually don't mind it if I'm like, I think it's actually authentic. Like, I know it's a sponsored deal, but I actually believe you really like and use the tool. And I can usually tell the difference, but maybe the average prospect, can't tell the difference in that instance either.
Yeah, which is fair, which also likes me to then cycle back. Like if we go back like 2 years when, there was a statistic around LinkedIn just before they were even on 1 billion users, like only 1 or 2% of like the active user base were actually posting original content. The rest was just kind of engaging and recycling and reposting the same stuff, which like back then when I was advising people on like, build your profile, get the followers, your average person does have like between 300 to 600 or 700 connections. And if you're the only one in that bracket posting, then you're probably the only person whose content they're really always seeing at the top of their feed, which I've actually completely forgotten about until you mentioned it now. But that's probably still true for a lot of people because I'm also like, we run in these circles where everyone has like 40,000 plus followers, and it's a lot of like creation going on all over the show. And you're obviously just seeing the stuff that's really like coming from these big profiles where the average person doesn't have that. So that's a good consideration, actually. So
I call it my ponds theory. I had this when I was first getting started, and it really helped me. And I've shared it with other people. Like, it's really intimidating to think about LinkedIn as an ocean. And I'm this little tiny minnow trying to make noise in this big ocean. But in reality, you have 500 followers. Each of those, like if you're starting out, each of them have 500 followers. Like, they don't see the same feed. And one post a week could probably dominate most of your connections. And to them, you are the authority. You're dominating their feed. And you're so worried that you whether you should be posting or not, because everyone around you has bigger followings, bigger engagement. Even if you say the same stuff as them, which you shouldn't do, you could still get traction in your pond because that's all you have to worry about dominating. And you grow strategically your pond, position yourself as an expert, saturate that, and you don't have to boil the whole ocean. And that is a really empowering thought. And it works in other ways in marketing too. But I think more people can latch onto that.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're sidetracking a little bit. I want to bring it back. So, cool. So that's a lot on like thought leadership on LinkedIn. So going back to the ecosystem. Now, obviously, LinkedIn is one channel within this ecosystem, and we've now explored like which ads you would use in different cases. But I know this question, but not that I know your answer, but I know you're the right person for this because you post quite often about the ecosystem. Like you can't run, and you mentioned it earlier, LinkedIn ads in isolation. It's not a channel where you go and you just dump all your marketing budget there. It's going to work A to Z. It's not ideal. So obviously there's an ecosystem that works better than not having the ecosystem. I want to hear your thoughts on what is that? Like, how do you almost break up? Like, what do you put on Google? What do you put on LinkedIn? What do you do on Facebook? Do you follow people around? Like, what's your comment of almost, I'm going to do this setup, go to, I know it's going to work, safe space?
Yeah, if I had, and obviously this is going to be nuanced and it depends for everyone, but there is a framework or the structure that seems to make sense to at least start with and modify to each individual. But like I say LinkedIn's usually not the place to start your marketing journey. Usually you should be digging in organically somewhere, starting with SEO foundations and paid search usually still makes sense. I know they're telling everyone that, Google is dead, but I think it's still like, I think the AI traffic is like anemic. Yes, that's going to grow, but people still, traditional B2B buyers are still researching on Google and Bing and whatnot. So I think that continues to be a foundational layer, organic, SEO, paid search. And now when you start doing those, you run into problems. Paid search is getting more and more competitive, cost per click, even on the high, or especially on the high intent terms. So then at that point, and usually you're seeing good traction there with those three, you're seeing initial. From there, LinkedIn retargeting starts to make a lot of sense because that's a good way to get more ROI out of Google. So once you start, scaling up Google, that's a demand capture. You're stepping in front of people who are in market looking for solutions, but it's very competitive, but it is shorter sales cycle. So that's really solid traffic. LinkedIn retargeting starts helping to make more sense of that, convert more of that traffic, make that ROI. And then from there, I usually like to start to spread to like programmatic, so like display, native, CTV, and Facebook as retargeting channels, because not all of those people are active on LinkedIn. You want to kind of spread that. Now, the problem with those channels is you can't layer on the same qualifying filters. So you need to be a little smart about, what time ranges and what you're doing there and how much you're investing. And then I would then come back to LinkedIn cold, introduce that. And I would think of that as high quality traffic I believe in that's going to have a longer sales cycle. So when you introduce LinkedIn cold, you're not going to be converting a ton of that traffic in the next 90 days. That's traffic that's going to take longer term. You don't, and that's the big problem. People come in with LinkedIn cold and they throw all their budget there. They don't get the results and then they move on. Like, I think that's like stage 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. So lay the foundation, get LinkedIn retargeting, spread your retargeting out more, saturate that group, introduce LinkedIn cold. And then from there, you're playing in middle of the bottom funnel. You start looking for ways to nurture, build trust, add in maybe email communities, take your paid ads, funnel them into your newsletter, your YouTube channel, your events and stuff like that. And then, it starts to be a much more thriving ecosystem. And you see kind of where the traffic is and where the focus should be. And then what channels or tactics within those channels make sense for where you think you need to move people through your funnel is how I kind of look at it.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, I like the fact that you say like almost leave LinkedIn cold to last, because I feel like a lot of people start there and they like build out the funnel on LinkedIn. It's like, okay, cool. I need to prospect people over here. I need to like get them to my website through LinkedIn. Then I need to retarget them, maybe add Facebook and display to that. But that's why it gets expensive, because you're going to the most expensive place with a lot of noise to people that a lot of people. On just going back to like how people use LinkedIn. A lot of people only go to LinkedIn once a week, maybe once in 2 weeks. So now you're paying to reach this person, get them to your website. So I like the fact that you're saying actually leave LinkedIn cold until much later, because that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes. Cool.
I would say there's one variation on that probably would be important to talk about. If you've dug into LinkedIn, because I feel like a bunch of our viewers are like active on LinkedIn. And so if you're a founder-led marketing subject matter, if you have someone like crushing it on LinkedIn organic, then it could make absolute sense to take that organic. And if you hadn't started any other ads, to then lean into LinkedIn ads to amplify what you've already proven and is working organically. In that scenario, then you could start different. You could go prove it out organically, amplify with LinkedIn ads, then spread out retargeting, introduce, paid search as early as possible, because that's going to shorten your cycle. All your thought leadership ads will help convert that. But in that scenario, I could see getting to LinkedIn a lot sooner. But that's doing the hard work and, 100, 200 posts, proving what actually works, and then amplifying with LinkedIn ads could be a great variation.
Yeah, so then you just basically boost the ad as a thought leadership to get it in front of the right people. On that note, how do you feel about, so let's say let's take a smaller company, could be service or new, like just the typical Adam Robinson founder-led playbook. You might not have the following, and you kind of invest in, okay, I'm really going to make good content. I understand what I'm putting out there. Is it a good idea to then immediately use that thought leadership ad to boost the the following? Because naturally, if you have decent content and you use that money, but you then obviously take that objective is to build following instead of like necessarily get sales out of it very quickly. Is that something that you ever do, or that you feel might be a good strategy, or rather avoid?
I could see it. The main problem with that would be I feel like the organic is a good proving ground, because if you can find success, if you can find what helps you grow organically, and you have the right content that's getting engagement from the right, then I feel like you have a lot more information to then boost. If you're boosting from the start and you're paying for basically all the followers you get, I feel like it'll be a faster learning curve, or it'll be a faster learning curve because you're getting the data faster, but it's also a more expensive way to go. So I guess it depends. If you have budget and you don't have the time and you want to fast track that could be a good option. For a lot of the small to mid companies I see, doing organic without the cost, but the time investment, and then layering on the ad spend to amplify, I think it is a better path. But yeah, I guess the other side of that would be, if I did want to jumpstart my organic growth, I might still lean on the other channels first, and then think about it like this. If someone visits my website and they're a qualified prospect, is there 15 or 20 pieces of content that I would love for them to see over the next 90 days that could change their mind and trust level in me? And if so, that could be your retargeting campaign, those 15, 20 assets. And yeah, I guess even if they're unproven organically, that would be, I'd feel more comfortable starting the spend and growing the followers from like my warm traffic from other places versus completely starting out, cold thought leader and then retargeting. I guess would probably be a more efficient way.
Cool. There we go. Sorry, I'm just asking questions that other people might have. What I wanted to ask is, do you have a wild card? Like do you ever branch? When do you branch out to Reddit, to the mediums, the other platforms where people don't really think of, it's not usually in there, like run a Spotify ad.
Yeah.
When do you have any of these wildcards that you sometimes squeeze in, and when and how?
I do think if you're making video assets, so a lot of people that are subscribing to this methodology, they're also creating video thought leadership assets. So I think that's an important key. I look at what assets do we have, and then what other channels, because yes, I could be a whole separate conversation on Quora and Reddit. I actually think those are super viable. I would start with retargeting first, and not, again, yeah, I would start with retargeting and not cold as my initial strategies. But if you have video assets like YouTube retargeting, or just trying to grow that community, repurposing their YouTube retargeting of your website visitors is powerful. Taking those video assets, going to programmatic like CTV, it's incredibly inexpensive now to show up. Like we show up in CTV. My mom sends me pictures of me interrupting, or basically a commercial on our Hallmark channel, but it's pennies on the dollar to retarget website visitors with CTV. And it looks really impressive. So those video assets that you have, I think could be repurposed in a way. And the one thing I like about, I guess, YouTube that most people don't know about, it has amazing SEO properties. So like it's way easier to rank page 1 of Google for a YouTube video than a blog. But I guess Reddit has a lot of those capabilities as well, which makes it another, opportunity. So I guess that's how I think about some of those wildcards. Like if I have the assets that allow me to tap into some of these other channels more easily, that's a little more appealing than like, okay, there's a new channel, I'm going to have to start from scratch. I can't reuse what I have, and it's like in isolation almost. But I would start with retargeting in any of those if I can, like retarget on Reddit and Quora versus starting out completely cold.
Cool. But yeah, so basically the takeaway there is actually evaluate your assets and see where they fit in. And if there's a channel where they happen to fit in very nicely, explore it at least for, and start with retargeting. Cool. We are running out of time, but I do want to hear your thought on AI. I'm not interested in what tools you're using. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm just curious, like your observation on like the quality of content that's going out, and like these pods that's going on, like the engagement pods and the amount of bots that's running around on LinkedIn, and like how is that influencing anything? Are they bots engaging with ads like more now than they were, skewing metrics, like on that level of like AI thinking? What's your thoughts there? Are you seeing anything?
I have a history of being like a tournament poker player, and so one of the things that's kind of always stuck with me is doing the opposite of what everyone else at the table is doing. So yes, there's trends that you don't want to get left behind, and there's a lot of FOMO. But there's also like with the rise of AI, there's a rise of like just crappy content, and being, as you said, like some of the things that stick out the most is like someone doing a Loom video and recording like a practical like how-to of something, and that's like way better and more beneficial than like this polished, completely cut video that just has like some fluffy nugget of information that doesn't really help. So I think genuine authenticity and genuine like subject matter expertise like being shared is probably going to become more valuable and stick out even more in the rise of AI. I do think it's helping smart people do more and do faster, come up with ideas, or maybe repurpose content in other platforms. But if you're using it to dial down the brain power that you're having to invest instead of amplify the brain power that you have, then yeah, you're going to be on the losing end of the equation. And I'm less concerned with being replaced by AI content and all that, because it's actually making what I do more valuable right now as people fumble around with it.
Cool. And the bot situation, like the engagement pods, is that hurting ads in any sense?
Not necessarily. There have been a couple, and I had actually experimented in the past, because one of the things I found to be true was an ad with no likes and comments will always underperform compared to the exact same ad with 50 likes and comments. And so even if those likes and comments are fake, there's some mental, switch that's triggered that people will give that post or ad more credit based on that. So I think despite, that it's complete fluffiness, that again, it still does somewhat work. I haven't seen it happen a lot in ads. I see it rampant on the organic side. I really haven't actually seen that too much on the ad side. There is a software called Podwalla. And so it's basically like an automated engagement pod where you can link your post and then, get like 100 automatic likes and comments. And I've seen people use that. I don't think it's rampant on the ad side like it probably is on Facebook. A lot of those are more rampant, but it probably will be in the next, this year maybe.
Cool. I think that's an interesting thought you have there with like using it to actually boost your ad. It's the same principle as like if you're launching like a drop shipping brand or like a new e-commerce brand, just buy some followers so your page on Instagram looks a little bit more legit to start up. Like it's better to land on a page with 10,000 followers than one with
I've actually given that advice too, and I'm on the fence. Like, so a LinkedIn company page, you're running ads, and then your company page and how many followers you have can be displayed on the ad. So like, as stupid as it sounds, like, I mean, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to buy 1,000 followers so that your company page doesn't look so brand new. But then obviously it's not a long-term strategy. Like it's a small mental hack that probably works. And if you don't, if you feel okay with that, like it's going to get you better results. Like you can wrestle with that morally yourself. But then, it's not a long-term strategy, but there's some benefit there.
Cool.
You can what you want.
Don't quote Justin on that advice. It's not. it's just a thought. Yeah, I was just curious to hear if there's anything that you're seeing that maybe I'm not in what everyone else is in. But I think that's it for today. I think there's a lot of value. I thank you, Justin. I think there will definitely be more collaboration with CXL moving forward. I believe there's some conversations happening, which is always exciting. But let's leave that there for now to end on a bit of a cliffhanger. But I thank you for your time, and I will definitely send this out. I'll turn this into some other content, obviously for the people who enjoy reading a bit more. I'll make a newsletter out of it and get it out there in front of the masses. And thanks for your time. Thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for your insights, and have a great day, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.